Now we're going to move to James Bressian from Canterbury University. James, I hope I said your name right there, but please feel free to correct me.
Kia ora, yeah, thanks, Belinda. It's James Brassington. Close, but not quite. All good. Okay, so this is a project that has been coordinated by the University of Canterbury and our colleagues at NIWA here, principally Andrew Tate, Hamish Biggs and Emily Lane. And we set out really to have to leverage what was a really exciting opportunity, which was to compare how this landscape has responded to Cyclone Gabrielle on the basis that we had an excellent baseline of data from the Provincial Growth Fund LiDAR that was collected across Hawke's Bay and also in Tairāwhiti as well. So we set out, we had three principal objectives. The first really was to map the spatial distribution of flood impacts before they were reworked. So we were trying to go in here quickly and capture exactly how the flood had affected the landscape, and particularly to quantify the extent, depth and volume of the extensive sand and silt deposits and also riverine scour that had occurred across the region. We were also then provide high quality 3D LiDAR data to support the parameterization and validation of flood hazard models. So here essentially we're really capturing high quality three-dimensional models of the landscape that we can then use for numerical simulations to enhance our understanding both of the flood event itself, reconstructing that flood event, but also then planning as we move forward. And then finally, to develop catchment scale sediment delivery models. And here the real interest is trying to understand exactly how much material has been moved from source to sink. And one of the big questions in understanding the role of extreme events here is whether, as the system is very, very highly connected during an extreme event, a larger volume of material is effectively connected and the source areas are worked out directly to the oceans in a much more effective transport pathway. And that has huge impacts for the amount of sediment that actually reaches the sea, but also the way it changes the bed level within the river systems and concomitant impacts upon flood risk as well. So what did we set out to do? Well, over 5 weeks, we set out and we captured using helicopter LiDAR about 1,700 kilometers squared of very, very dense three-dimensional data across both Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. You can see there in the bottom the maps of the areas that we've covered. The areas shown in green are the bits we've yet to process. Everything else has been processed to date. And helicopter LiDAR was really important to us because it meant that we could operate not only to collect very high fidelity, high density LiDAR data, but also we could operate below the cloud base. So we were able to operate flexibly and quickly in what was quite a constrained weather window. So the kind of products we're producing here are essentially maps of elevation change. And we're showing you here this illustration here from Dartmoor Road. On the Tūtaekurī River here, and we can compare the pre and post LiDAR and essentially get a map of how the elevation has changed within the landscape. We can do a little bit more than that, and that is that we can actually back out those numbers to give us depths of change, so depths of scour and depths of sedimentation as well, and then compute the total amount of material that's moved through the landscape. And in that one little illustration there at Dartmoor Road, there's around 1.5 million tons of material which has been deposited in that small area of the landscape. In terms of the products and the outcomes we're generating here, we've produced elevation change maps at a 1 meter spatial resolution for all of the areas we're working on. We've supplied that information along with depth and volumetric analysis to the regional councils, but also a number of ministries and crown entities as well. We've also provided information packs on the localized impacts to local iwi. So the MTT have been using our data and we're producing maps to help them guide their workshops through a series of hui that they have coming up as well. We've also supplied the 3D data to support critical infrastructure companies and agencies within the region. So one of the first users of these data were Unison to try and map out whether there were issues associated with land level changes for their electricity distribution network, but we've also supplied those data to Kiwi Rail as well as to the asset management agencies at the regional councils as well. So in terms of the outputs, where we're going with this, we are providing essentially data products that are above the LINS elevation program specification. So that's classified point clouds and raster elevation products. Most of those data already, 60% of them have already been delivered to our project partners and regional councils, and then the rest we hope to have supplied by the end of this month if we work as effectively as we can. There's about 60 terabytes of data to process, so it's taken a while. The real stab for us is trying to develop what we call 4D regional landscape change models then, and we're doing that under a range of different uncertainty models. It seems like a very simple job to compare two digital elevation models. The problem is they both contain errors. And so when we look at the differences between them, we need to understand which changes are real and which changes are essentially within the error of the two data sets. So we've developed those preliminary models, which we've supplied and are being used actively at the moment, but our continuing work is really trying to develop a slightly more nuanced model of DEM uncertainty, and also managing some of the bias we've encountered in the historic Provincial Growth Fund LiDAR data sets. So we're targeting delivering of that by October. And then we've also got a bunch of related work, which isn't actually funded through the programme as it stands at the moment, but things that we're pursuing along this, and they are to develop catchment scale models, particularly for the Esk, the Tairāwhiti and Uawa. You'll see in that little image in the bottom there that our surveys were really focused on the river corridors, the key areas of sedimentation, and we want to understand the whole catchment scale. So we're going back and acquiring LiDAR over those areas in the next month, and we'll be developing a catchment scale model of source to sink sediment transfer, hopefully by the end of the year. We're also going to be acquiring continuous riverbed elevation models using bathymetric LiDAR to understand exactly how bed level has changed on the major rivers of the Heretaunga Plains, with a real question here around whether changes in flood capacity have driven that event, but also may create added residual risk as we move forward over time as well.